2025. Can you see the screen okay? Everything? Great. How to have residency applications that rock. I have my colleagues here. I'm going to show you in a minute, but welcome. Please use the chat function to send questions or comments. We have a lot of people on the call. We'll probably get more as it goes on. Any program directors, if you could just introduce yourself and your institution by chat after you log in, that would be great. But feel free to send in comments. We'll break periodically to take those questions where we can. Some we might defer to later if it's information I know that's coming up. I have just getting over respiratory virus and I'm quite croaky and I'm hoping my voice is going to make it till the end, but excuse the coughing and the croaking if it comes up. As ever, my thanks to Donna McGeard for the very cool title, which I stole off her shamelessly, as she keeps reminding me. And just interrupt us with those questions, but rather you didn't do it vocally because it just gets to be a lot to try and deal with. Please mute. If you haven't muted now, mute, and we'll be yelling at people to mute if we get a lot of background stuff. So this is me in the middle with a bunch of my APDR colleagues here at the AUR, one of our favorite meetings, or AAR as it is now. I'm not going to show you my face now because I can't stand looking at it through a long talk. And I have here my colleague, Stephanie Yen. She is our DR program director, and Tom Burdick, who is our IR program director. They're all fabulous colleagues to have here, and they will help me in this call as well as give their own input. So this session will give you the perspective of radiology program directors. Hopefully a whole bunch of you are having good training by your institutions into applying for residencies and ERAS applications, but it tends to be more generic. So this is really specific from the program directors. So these are the folks in the field. While it's being conveyed through me, it has been collated from a lot of different people over many years. They're the ones who review your applications and they're the ones who interview you. And this, I'll just give you a moment to just glance through what we're going to be going through. In the interest of this talk, I spent 4 hours yesterday going through the 350 pages of ERAS and NRMP reports to try and pull out statistics. I've done my best here, guys. They are, frankly, they could be, NASA space reports, the way that they're presented. We will have a Q&A at the end. If you have not already, I highly recommend you download the AMSA guide for applying for radiology residency. We're on our 13th version as of last year. There'll probably be another one coming out this year. If you just Google AMSA guide, it will take you immediately to this in Google and you can get it. So should you relax or panic right now? I'm sure there's a little bit of panic going on. So here's the good news. This is all specialties, all residents, that 94% matched in 2025 of USMDs and 93% of DOs. Okay, so that's the real good figures. Obviously, this includes a lot of different programs. The DR stats in 2025, there were 169 programs that offered 1,057 positions. And by the end, 15 were unfilled, which was kind of surprising to us because the last few years it's been 0 or 1. But there were 15 unfilled. And what they filled with are 69% MDs, 15% DOs, and 11% international medical graduates. And that last group includes both the US international medical schools and the non-US. I kind of put them together. 86% of USMDs in whom their first choice was DR matched in DR. That's as far as I can get out of the statistics. And so forgive me if that is not 100% right, but I think that is in the ballpark from everything I can find. It's very confusing because, a lot of people apply to different specialties we talk about. IR, similar stats, 71 programs, 150 positions, so less. 3 were unfilled at the end of SOAP. The breakdown is 82% MD, 15% DO, 6% IMG, so somewhat lesser on the DO and IMG side. And 83% of USMDs with first choice of IR matched in IR. So, really overall very good statistics. The other good thing is the job market in radiology is booming. Everybody is desperate to recruit people. I don't see this being desperately changed when you folks come out of residency in 5, 6 years and it comes out. There are 2,000 open positions on the ACR website. So nearly 2,000. That's an incredible job opportunity. Just a little mention about IR programs, as well as applying to the integrated IR program, which is pretty much what we're going to be talking about here. There are other ways into IR. You can transfer in to a free internal slot if you're PGY 2 to 4. If your program has the ESIR program, which is 4 years of DR plus 1 year of ER into IR internal, you can do it that way. And then there are programs that have independent IR slots where you do 4 years of DR and 2 of IR, and that can be external. So there's 3 different ways you can get in. Even if you decide, you haven't decided now or you don't get into IR now. Quick mention that IR programs do prefer, some require surgical PGY1s rather than medical. And I'm sure you may be aware if you're thinking of this, but the PGY 2 to 4 is the same as DR. So you spend 3 years in DR and then 2 years that are IR focused and contain clinical rotations, as well as mammo, a month in mammo and a month in nukes. The Society of Interventional Radiologists has a tremendous amount of information about paths to IR for medical students. So I highly recommend go there if you're planning to apply to IR. All right, a couple of disclaimers. This is data that we've gathered from many people, but it's a collation of personal data. Okay. And a lot of facts I have summated from ERAS and from NRMP. While I'm trying to give a global opinion, different programs have different expectations. There's a very wide range of radiology programs out there. We've got this large academic programs at one end. We have community radiology programs at the other end. Programs vary in different areas of the country. Hopefully I've got some program directors on the call who can give some different opinions. I'm trying not to give the opinion just of Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center. If you have not already, meet with your radiology student advisor. You see, I'm not that scary. I stroke tigers from my spare time. You must have, hopefully you've met with them already. If you haven't, you need to meet with them now. And we need your CV and we need your informal transcript to be able to advise you appropriately. Now think about when you meet with that faculty advisor, there's some things to do. Planning the rest of your summer this year and fall, whether they're going to be in general or subspecialty radiology electives, whether there are potential research projects you can be involved with, should you do away rotations, and then discussing the supplemental information that we're going to talk about further. You want to discuss what types of programs you want to apply to, whether it's IR or DR, and they may say that you should apply to different ones than you initially want to. So they're going to try and, make sure you have the best chance of success at getting matched in radiology. Let's talk about ERAS applications. So we're going to be talking further about these letters in a minute, but this is a good opportunity to identify who you're going to get those letters from and discuss this with your faculty advisor, and we'll talk about those again. Virtual interviews came with COVID, but have not left with COVID. COVID hasn't left, and apparently, nor have the virtual interviews. I suspect they're here to stay. I'd be very surprised if they go back to in-person interviews at this time, but, certainly for this year, that's what you have. So thinking about IR versus DR as to whether you apply to just IR or you apply to IR and DR, a minority of programs favor having IR only applicants. I don't know how many there are. I'm just going to ask, by the way, for our program directors who've not been on this call before, and lucky you, if there's a question mark, I'm going to stop for comments. Most programs consider IR and DR applicants equally. IR only is a high risk for weaker candidates, and I'll show you some data about this at the moment. If you you know, you can think about applying at different programs, IR1, DR1, but most programs do not need that. So I don't know, if you are IR program directors on the call, could you just put your comments in about this? And I'm going to ask Dr. Burdick, our IR program director, his feelings about this.
So I
Don't take that off. Take it from mine.
Sorry. Way too echoey in here. So we certainly don't look down our nose at all if people apply to both IR and DR at the same time. If I was a medical student and I've the same person I am now, I love IR, and I thought, man, if I can't get in, I can at least maybe get into a DR program and then transfer over later. It's much better chance you're going to be able to do that than try and transfer in from something else. So I think it's certainly a good idea to apply to both. If your heart is set on IR and you're not applying to DR programs, that's also not going to be held against you by IR programs.
Is there any comments there?
No,
Chat.
I agree with Tom. But when we consider both IR and DR.
Yeah, equally. Any comments in chat?
No.
Okay.
Comments in the chat.
All right, so there's some real, you know, sunshine in the fact that you only have virtual interviews. You know, it's a shame that we don't get to meet you and that you don't get to see the programs in the area inside out, but it's way cheaper than you save yourselves thousands and thousands of dollars traveling around the country. You don't have to be off clinical services where you're learning. You does absolutely widen the geographical areas that you can apply because you're not limited by time and travel, and decreases your scheduling conflicts. Now, a word to the candidates, and we're going to talk more about this when we talk about signaling. You know, avoid over applying. Don't overload the programs by saying, well, I'm going to send in, you know, 100 applications, even though I'm a very highly qualified student, because it gets more and more challenging for the program directors to deal with the 600, 700, 800, sometimes 1,000 applications that are going to all of their programs. Generally speaking, most programs are getting at least 100, if not more, applications for every place they have. For DR, slightly smaller number than for IR. Use signaling strategically to try and reduce this numbers we're going to talk about, and do your research. And we're going to come around to all of those things. Now, programs have really adapted to the virtual environment. And so most program websites are going to give you a lot more information about the institution and local information that you used to be able to get. You'll see videos, you'll see walking tours, you'll see links. And they've come up with a lot of creative approaches to the virtual environment, including interviewing, social opportunities. There used to be dinners. It's not a dinner anymore, obviously, and some different things. So take advantage of all of these offerings that you have. If there's something that we need to kind of address to the group, if it's something you can just put in chat, Tom, that's great. Let's just run over the timing. Again, there should be, generally speaking, you guys should be informed about this, but ERAS opens June 4th, so ERAS is open. Your registration to get your applications uploaded is September 15th. Program review by us is September the 24th onwards. Interview offers usually start in October, but can start, you know, September 25th in theory. But they tend to continue through January. Now note that programs can decide when they stop getting applications. That's a flexible date. So we get to choose each individual program. So when's ours, Stephanie?
I'm sorry.
When do we stop accepting applications?
As soon as ERAS opens, and then
We start, but then when do we close?
we say December 1st.
Okay, so we say December 1st, other patients may say later. So, you know, get your applications in early. The deadline for rank list is March 4th, and then match week, yay, is March 16th next year. So try and get your applications in before mid-September. The early bird does catch the worm here. Your chances of being interviewed are greater if you're in early than in late, when most program quotas may be filled by then. Some programs do not answer interviews until their application window closes. So You know, if you're not hearing from a program, yay or nay, you might want to just check with the program coordinator, because there are some programs that release everything in November, as opposed to sort of in pieces as they come through. All right, let's talk a little about ranking. So your first challenge is to get yourself noticed, right? So your first challenge is to get an interview, get yourself to stand out from the crowd. There are these 600 applications to our program. We're going to interview 100 of them. So you want to be those 1 in 6. And in this, small things do matter, right? Both good things and bad things can end up tipping you into an interview versus a no interview. Some of this is geographic. Some programs have very strong geographic preferences. For example, the Midwest programs tend to interview students from the Midwest, not exclusively, but there's a bias. The California ones, kind of same. In New Hampshire, we might look a little strangely, perhaps, on somebody who's been born and raised and educated in Texas, and then all of a sudden they're applying to New Hampshire, unless there's something in their application that says, I went to camp in New Hampshire every year, and we've had this, and I absolutely loved it. And we can see that they really are serious about coming to New Hampshire. We're not just one of 80 programs, and the signal's obviously going to help. There is a certain amount of serendipity, however, and you've got to realize that if there are 10 candidates and we have 1 place there, and that's the only position that we have, you know, we may be, you know, saying, okay, well, you know, they all look fabulous, but we're going to interview this one. So there's a certain serendipity, and we'll talk about how to reach out to programs in a bit. Honesty is absolutely key. If we see anything in your application that suggests you're not being completely honest, that is, you know, kiss of death. You're very unlikely to get interviewed. Now, here's the results of a survey from 2023 for DR. I don't have one for IR, well, at least the IR one, the numbers of respondees were not enough into what, and the attendees, they were asked to pick the top 5 factors that they felt contributed to them interviewing a candidate. Okay, so that's why there's overlapping percentages here. The number 1 was that you had signaled that program. Remember that. We're going to come back to that. Number 2, your core clerkship grades, and number 3, your step 2 score. Okay, so and then look down here at all the other things and how meaningful or meaningless they were. You know, there were some things like, you know, your hobbies and volunteer experience and research experience not ranked very highly here. Your number 2 challenge is interviewing to be able to rank, okay? Here's another survey coming out the same date. These were factors affecting the rank. This used a different rating scale. They were rated from 1 to 5. In the mean importance, they think that these things affect ranking. Step 2 score has interestingly bumped to the top here, but look at the next 2, interactions with faculty and residents and your interpersonal skills. In other words, how we interacted with you in the interview. All things personal statement down at the bottom, 3.7, despite the fact that you guys are all going to sweat about this no end. So let's start with personal statements, because I know that these are nobody's favorite thing to do. And trust me, they're not our favorite thing to read either when you're reading several hundred of them. And luckily that's Dr. Jens and Burdick's job now, and not mine. All right, so let's talk about different ones. Well, you can have the safe one, right? The safe personal statements, you know, I want to go into radiology because I really like images, and I had this patient whose life was saved by radiology, blah, 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 blah. Okay, they're fine, they're safe. They're not going to, you know, they're not going to do any harm, but they probably won't help you. Then there's the personal statements that really make us pay attention, that really make us think, wow, you know, I kind of like to meet this woman, and kind of, you know, man, they've got some interesting stuff going on there. Want to take us further. And then there are the personal statements where, frankly, until we read it, you would have been interviewed. And once we've read it, no. And we'll give you some examples. So these need to be succinct, they need to be clear, and they need to be interesting. All right. Spelling and grammar need to be perfect. And nobody has any excuse these days. You've got Grammarly. It's built into your Word document. It's going to tell you. Now, it may not get it right because it may not get your meaning, but you need to at least run it. It's very easy to have typos. And you're going to see these little blue boxes coming up a lot in the next few sections. And those are direct things that we have taken from ERAS applications at our institution in the last decade or so. So, you know, come on, guys. Remember that Grammarly or spell checkers may not pick up some of these differences correctly. You still need to read it. So you need to be concise, they need to be eloquent, they need to show personality. Keep it short. In about 3/4 of a page, I reckon, is about right. If it rolls into 2 pages, everybody's enthusiasm. Multiple program directors have told me this. Suddenly your heart kind of stops and you're like, oh, really? Nobody's that interesting. So, you know, if you can't convey your experiences and your personality in half 1 page, you know, think again. However, they can be too short, all right? This was one resident's entire personal statement. And if you want to see what it looks like in 12 font, that's how it looked. So very confident, but probably a little bit better than that. You do want to include why you want to be a radiologist, but these are ones that we all know visual learner thing. Please don't give us that. Photography, we don't care. And, you know, okay, fine, but, you know, perhaps don't tell us. I think somebody in medical school always tells you to have the cute medical story about the patient and how that brought you down to neuroradiology. But you got to realize that everybody does this. And so that becomes a little, yeah, right, whatever. So what do we like to read? We want to read things that make you you. So experiences that have really developed you as a physician or developed you as a person, or adversities that you've overcome. And sometimes just, you know, really interesting things you do. So, you know, maybe it was that, you know, you were in the service and doing something. Maybe you trained as a ballerina or a sailor, or that, you know, you've played some sport that has developed teamwork skills or brought something out. We want to hear what you want from a program, and the strengths that you will bring to that program. So, you know, what do you really see as the kind of program that's going to fit you, and what are you going to bring to them? Would any of the program directors like to put in anything into the chat here that we can share with the students? And are there any other questions that you've not managed to answer to? I've seen you typing, but I just can't read at the same time as talk.
I'll admit, I'm a big sucker for a really good personal statement that can really change it. But you can tell what comes from the heart, and you can tell what doesn't. And after you've read hundreds of these, that's really becomes obvious. One of my biggest pet peeve is the personal statement that tells me how great radiology is. We know, we're already doing it. Of course, we know that you want to do it because it's great. We completely understand that. Don't waste a paragraph on that sort of stuff.
Anything else in the chat? No. If you have any red flags in your application, explain them in your personal statement. So if you failed a course, or you took a year off to, you know, nurse your mother who had cancer, or you had some kind of a medical issue, you don't have to say what it is, but just explain it, because the program directors, when you get a lot, you know, they know exactly when you were into medical school, they know what year you're going to be coming out. And if those dates don't kind of fit right, then, you know, there's always a question. What do you do? I mean, maybe you took a research year. Maybe you know, decided you needed a mental health break and travel through Europe. I mean, you know, it's fine, but just explain them. You know, you don't want people to think that you were, you know, in jail or something. Don't try to be too cute. You know, here's some quotes, I'll just let you read these. It was rather strange. I never quite understood the whole mountain thing because we never interviewed that candidate. Show your strengths without being too cocky. We were so tempted to interview the I am a force to be reckoned with student, but we never did. Although I still kind of wish we had. I love I aspire to be a better than average neuroradiologist. It's always good to have a goal to be better than average. Sometimes there is way too much information in these, so you can read this, but I can tell you that the first 3 people who interviewed him asked him how much he weighs now, because we felt it was kind of, open source, since he'd had a long discussion about it. This one on the top, these were both from the same personal statement, which kind of made us feel this. So there's a narrow margin between interesting and frankly weird. Don't plagiarize. Yes, there are places you can get your personal statement on the web. There are also sites on the web where we can check for plagiarism. Now, ChatGPT has brought a whole new era. And frankly, this is probably, it's only this year and perhaps last year where we actually have to think about how we're going to deal with this. My personal feeling is, if you're using AI to check your grammar and spelling and maybe make your sentences a little more coherent, I'm okay with that. I mean, I use that all the time. I use it in my emails. I don't think there's any problem with that. And, to my mind, you'd be foolish not to use it. That's very different from saying, hey, ChatGPT, can you please write a personal statement for me for radiology residency? That is not this, that is not okay. Last night, out of interest, I went to ChatGPT to see if it would write me one. Only, unfortunately, I'd used all my free chats up, trying to get it to pull data, which it didn't, out of the NRMP and ERAS reports. So I couldn't ever find out, and I have to try again tonight. So I'm sure it can, but I don't think that's what you should do. And I suspect that we will become attuned very fast, the same way as we know that what AI generated images look like, to know what AI generated personal statements. Now, should you personalize personal statements, you will have the option in ERAS to make specific personal statements for specific institutions. You don't have to do it for all of them, but if you wanted to select a few and personalize that personal statement, you can certainly do that. Now, why should you? If you are particularly interested in that program and area, and it's not going to be obvious in your CV. So, if we have a student who trained in New England and is applying to this program, we know they're kind of interested in that area. But if you don't, you might want to put something in. So maybe there's something specific about the program, or you have local family, or there's some faculty, you've always wanted to work with Dr. Lewis at Dartmouth-Hitchcock, and that's why you're coming here, just joking. Something very specific about the program or the institution. Don't just slot in the program name, right? If you just put in, I really want to be a resident at Dartmouth-Hitchcock, period, and yeah, okay, don't bother. That's just, too much work for you. But, strongly consider, for programs that you really want to go to and you have a very specific interest in, put that in. Get them reviewed, all right, by several people. Ask your faculty advisor to do it. Ask your, your friends and family to do it. See how it reads. Now, any other comments from students or questions from students about personal statements before we move on to supplemental information?
Nothing in the chat.
Okay. Supplemental information. We're into year 4. I'm still getting a bit of an echo. Is your thing all the way down?
I'll just mute it.
Yeah, is it volume all the way down? Is that better? No. All right. So the supplemental information, we're into year 4 of this, and this was brought in to try and give the opportunity for holistic review. So we're not just too, numbers driven by step 2. This information is used for interview selection only. It is supposed not to be used for ranking candidates. Now, that's what program directors are told. There's no way of telling if they ever use it. I know that my program directors here don't use it, but we can't, I can't tell you every program director in the country. So just say what they're told. Not all specialties use it. In 2024 cycle, it was 25. There are three specialty-specific criteria: geographic preferences, past experiences, and program signaling. And we're going through each of those. Go. They are optional for students. You can put something in every section or none of the sections, or just one of the sections. You can decide. And as you'll find out in a minute, we don't know if you haven't put stuff in. However, 99% in 2024 submitted in one or more sections. So clearly most do. They are optional for programs too, but 98% opted in 2024. I don't have the numbers for 2025, so most of us do. Let's do geographic. You can put in up to 3 preferences or none, so up to 3. There are 16 geographical divisions, and these are the US governmental splits, and some of them are not entirely logical. I forget which one it is, but there's something in the southeast that has some weird, you know, like West Virginia and Florida are in the same grouping or something like that. Anyway, you have to look at it. You can put in a 300-character description of your preference of where you want to live. You also get to select whether you want to be urban versus rural on a 5-point scale. Now, we've had people say they really want to be urban, and yet they want to be in New Hampshire. So, you know, make sure these kind of gel a little bit. Programs know if you've selected their area or if you have no preference, but we don't know if you've elected not to have or, you know, you've not put it in. So we know that you've selected the Northeast for us, or that you don't mind where you go, but we don't know if you just haven't put in anything, sort of thing. Have I got that right, Stephanie? Yeah. Or if you supplemented it. So it's a little weird, but that's the way it is. Don't shoot the messenger. Past experiences, another thing to sweat over, along with your personal statement. So you can have up to 10 selected experiences where you describe the activities, responsibilities, and context. And then from them, you pick up to 3 meaningful experiences, and you can write up to 300 characters on why it was meaningful. And so, you know, what do you want to do for these? Well, you know, things that they don't have to be in radiology, first of all. They can, and some of them, you know, you probably think about them in radiology, but it might be a research project you did. It might be a volunteer experience. It might be a life event. I mean, there are many different things you can put in here, but think about things that developed your personality, developed your skills, developed your leadership skills, your communication skills, your medical skills, anything like that. Along with these, there's a whole load of metadata tagging that you put into them about the type of experience. You know, I forget the different categories. Can you remember what they are? They're like, is this research or clinical or whatever? Yeah. The primary focus area. And yes, experiences, Garrett, can be before medical school. And what characteristic you developed during the experience. So this developed my leadership skills and my medical knowledge or whatever it is. So yeah, more to sweat about. There's then, for some candidates, you have the option of putting in past experiences that had an impactful experience. And these are generally candidates that had challenges or obstacles they've overcome. So, you know, perhaps this could have been an educational obstacle or financial or family or, can you explain any more about these? Because I always have trouble with these ones.
It's pretty popular, like with homelessness.
Homelessness, yeah. Addiction. So you don't,
health issue.
yeah. So these are, you know, this is a good opportunity if you've got those red flags to, you know, be able to expand upon them more. And for all of these, it's kind of, how did I overcome this and improve? And how will this help me face challenges in the future? Tom, you got any other thoughts about that?
I think a lot of these also tend to be maybe family health problems that impacted their education. That's a very common thing that people put kind of in this area. You know, I had to take an extra year in medical school because my mother developed a serious illness or something. So I had to take care of it. We see that.
Can you folks hear Dr. Burdick? Because he's sort of on the other side of the room a little bit from me. So somebody let me know whether they can hear Dr. Burdick okay or not in the chat. That'd be great. You can always come and hit, they can hear you. Any of the other program directors, if you've got any other thoughts about the supplemental, we're going to move on to problem signaling, but anything about these past experiences, then please just put them in and comments so the students can see them. So program signaling, this is so important. I'm going to show you some data here about program signaling. So you have up to 12 programs that includes IR and DR. So if you're applying to both programs, you only get 12, you don't get 24. There are 6 gold and 6 silver. This is our second year or third year that we've done 6 and 6. Second year of 6 and 6. We went up from 3 and 3. No, we went up to 6 total, and now we split into this gold and silver thing. You should include your home and away rotation institutions in this, and that was brought in last year. It used to be, oh, you don't have to include the home ones, but now if you want to be, no, it was 6 and 6 this year. I can't remember what it was the year before.
But it says 6 and 6 in the ERAS.
It stayed the same this year, and it stayed the same this year because I didn't change this slide.
And now it's the AAR, right? Let me see if I can find it. I thought it was something had changed.
There is a difference with IR. I think it went down a little bit. I'm blanking right now myself.
Okay, well, we get a lot of research in the background. As I said, I did have about 350 pages to go through last night, so they're just going to check into that. It was definitely 6 and 6 last year, and I thought they were keeping it the same this year. All right, number aside, which Dr. Yen is typing away madly here. You should include your home away institutions. You want to be interviewed at Dartmouth Hitchcock, and you're at Dartmouth Hitchcock, signal us, okay? Program.
Oh, yeah. I actually tell my sub-interns not to signal us because I know they're interested, and I'm going to interview them anyway. If you hauled yourself all the way up to Dartmouth and spent a month with us, you bought yourself an interview, you've gotten in, that's fine.
I'm just saying that is yes. Dr. Burdick's personal.
There's a lot of variation, and a lot of programs, a lot of big programs, they may have 20 or 30 sub-Is. We get a small handful over the summer. We can kind of keep the number down a little.
So if your program director you're applying to says, don't worry, at this institution, I'm going to interview you anyway, that's fine. But just realize that the ERAS guidelines say to do that. So that's, you know, Dr. Burdick's, he can do that because, as he says, he only has a couple and he knows who he wants to interview. We know if you've signaled, we do not know if you have not signaled or you've skipped that question. Other specialties have very different signals between 3 and 30. So if you are applying to more than one specialty, which we'll talk about later, be very careful to check their signaling thing. So there's very different ways. So I think it's urology. They have is it urology or ortho that has like 30 signals? Yeah, they have 30. So they basically, you don't signal, you know, you only bother applying to ones you signal. So they've done it to reduce the number of applications.
Some ortho programs will not interview you unless you signal.
So
these are my notes picture that I found from AAR. It said DR and IR-DR will separate signal in 2026 match. DR will increase signals, silver signals to 9. So we will do 6 gold and 9 silver, and I think IR-DR will 8.
All right, well, I'm sorry I confused you all guys all then. You'll be with your ERAS. So
we have 6 for DR, it's 6 gold, 9 silver. For IR-DR, they have 8 signals. That's all I have. That's all I wrote.
So they're separating completely?
Separating them
okay.
Completely. That's what I have.
Delete my prior slide. So I will have to correct that slide. So IR 8, and they're just silver, or 4 and 4?
No, Tom, you know, I didn't specify.
I know it changed, but.
Okay, all right. We'll research that. I will rotate back to 8 gold and no silver. I don't kind of know where they do that.
It was silver, to be honest, but now we'll have 15 total, 6 gold and 9 silver for DR.
Okay, so you can have a lot of signaling going on. Here's the important stuff. you are way more likely to be interviewed if you signal. And if you have geography and signal, you're much more likely again. There is variation between programs. So some programs only interview people who signal. Other smaller programs who may get less signals may have a wider range. This was from 2024 with 6 gold and 6 silver. I could not find for the life of me any more recent information than this. But if you look at how likely you are to be interviewed if you're gold versus silver versus none, you can see there's a big ratio between those. So you have to be very, very strategic. Here's another thing that they had. This was the predicted interview probability by program signal. So if you didn't send a signal, you had a 9% chance of being interviewed in DR, where you had a 58% if you sent a program signal. This is ones where your geographical preference was not aligned with your signaling. So in other words, here you didn't send a signal and it wasn't aligned, you weren't going to get an interview. Here you sent a signal, however, you said you wanted to be in some other area of the country, okay? Then you had a pretty low chance to get an interview. Went up to 64% if you wanted to be in that area of the country and you sent an interview. So this is all kind of common sense, right? If we know you want to be here, we're going to be more likely to interview you. Here's IR, didn't send a signal, 21%, did 70%. And the same thing with geographical preference, went up to 77% if you signaled and had a geographical preference in that area. So apart from me slightly confusing you with the number of signals this year, students, please put in any questions. So it's 8 for IR, all gold, 8 gold, and then it's 6 gold and 9 silver for DR. So you've got quite a lot of scope there, but you still have to be very strategic. So what this says again is if you send another 40 applications in with no signaling, these are very low yield and you're going to be paying for it.
So the question is, how heavily do you weigh silver versus gold signals?
Oh, don't look at me. How heavily do you weigh them, Dr. Yen?
I'm still trying to figure out silver signals. I mean, I just know that that your silver signal meet, you're not considering as one of your top 6 programs. I mean, I look at everything and I weigh other things in terms of personal statement and all the rest of your application to determine whether we'll select you to interview.
If any of the PDs on the line have any thoughts about how they use them this last go around, just please put it in the chat and share it with the students.
I've heard 2 theories on this. If you have your silver means you're number 7 on their list. I've heard that quoted, but I've always looked at it as like, well, you don't have that many anyway. So you're just using everything. You're still using something that you have to tell me you want to come here, rather than just no signal at all.
That's correct.
Yeah. I mean, I hope they're just going to make them all one level because I don't think it helps. I think it, just give them 15 signals. It will make more sense. All right, let's think about letters of recommendation. So how many do you need? 3 to 4. You need 1 or 2 within the specialty. So if you're going for IR, from your IR rotation, but then you could have 1 from DR as well, 1 from a sub-I, maybe 1 from a research mentor. Chair letters, we don't really find any help whatsoever in radiology because chairs don't know you. So they're just going to reiterate your CV and we can read that for ourselves. So some specialties you do need chair letters, but not for us. All right, so many of these unfortunately end up being very kind of generic, but what do we like to hear? So this would be a very negative letter of recommendation. This is us saying this student sucks, but we can't say that. So the best come from somebody who has worked with you for a protracted period. They really know you. Now, it could be through many ways. It could be through research or some educational project. Maybe they're your mentor, some medical related volunteer activity. Maybe they're your on-doctoring mentor from year 1, but somebody who knows you and not somebody who you read out with in the workstation for 4 hours because they don't know you. They, know how you presented yourself for 4 hours. It's not the same thing. it doesn't, the other one, they don't all have to be from radiology. I'd rather see a great letter of recommendation. You know, maybe you were thinking of surgery when you were second year and you did a whole load of stuff in surgery, and you get a great letter from them. It's okay. We do not expect people to be born radiologists. You don't have to enter medical school wanting to be a radiologist. I mean, maybe you only decided last week, and that's okay too. I've had students who decide in September and we're sort of scrambling because maybe they didn't do an elective in radiology until late. So that happens. Any comments from anyone about letters of recommendation? Do make sure that the correct specialty is mentioned. We have had these. I mean, they just make us laugh usually, but you know, it's okay. All right, so ask now for those letters. So work out with your faculty advisor who's to send them, sit down with them, and then check with that person whether they are willing to write you one, and then you send them the ERAS link along with your CV and transcript. They should know how to load up into ERAS. It's pretty obvious if they haven't done previously. Now, one thing just to note, and I'd recommend as well that you go onto the AMSA site and you identify, so here, I'm about to answer that question, Mitchell, I was ahead of you there. The standardized letter of recommendation has been developed by AMSA and APDR. There's a template at the AMSA website, and it uses a combination of ranking tools and focus comments, and we like it. I know Dr. Yen likes it. I'm much rather, Dr. Burdick likes something a little bit more verbal apparently, but is a letter, I'll answer that in a sec.
I think that the problem with letters is they're going to be anonymous, and when you ask as a student, you're just not sure what you're going to get. If someone came to me and asked me to write a letter in a different format that I don't use, that would be a little bit weird. I guess I would probably do it, but I wouldn't feel like my heart was in it. When I see the templated letters of recommendation from other people, I don't hold it against the student. I think, well, that's just how they're doing it. And a good group eval is good. So I don't think one is better than the other. And I think it's just really rough on students in some ways. You kind of don't know what you're
doing. I guess I would sort of play devil's advocate there because, you know, I've written 1,000 letters of recommendation and I really like using the standard. And so what I suggest to our students is that they download it and they send it to faculty and say, here's an option. You know, you can, if you want to write, you know, your usual more verbose one, or you can write this, and it gives you a big chunk at the end that you can write more specific comments. But I actually really like it because it saves, you know, for me, you know, I don't want to have a creative writing exercise. I want to be very focused and specific about that student, and then be able to say, you know, some commentary on the end of what are their highlights without having to do kind of a page and a half of it. So I think we're getting different opinions here. If anyone else online wants to put their opinions in, I would give it to them as an option. I know a lot of APDR generally likes it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they do. I'm not certainly not going to penalize a student who doesn't use the SLOR template,
no.
But I personally find them to be more helpful than just a paragraph. And you do have the option to write, you know, a paragraph or two at the very end, in addition to sort of ranking comparison to other students that you've had.
Yeah.
Maybe that's helpful.
I think I like it because I might say a student's great, but you know what? They were still kind of in the 70th percentile, you know, even though I think they're good and they're going to be good residents. So I guess it's a little difference, but I know a lot of program directors do like them. I think you can answer that question there, Tom, that came up. All right, we forget. All right, you might tell us now, you might ask it now, and you might send us here this application now, but if you find out that they haven't been loaded, and you will know if they've been uploaded, please just remind us, just send us a gentle reminder and just say, you know, it'd be great if you can get this up to, if you can, sorry, I shouldn't read Tom's comments because they make me laugh, so so, you know, please just drop us an email and say, hey, you know, gentle hint, I hope you're still able to do my letter of recommendation. Here's the ERS link, just in case you've lost it, which we will have lost it. So, you know, please feel free to link that. You
There's
can,
a question regarding, is an MD letter of reference preferred over a research mentor that is a PhD within the field?
I think that would be fine. Yeah, I think if that person really knows you and you've worked with them, that would be fine. And you know, if you're applying to an academic institution, it might be even better sometimes. Can you submit your application before they're all in? Yes, but do chase them because we don't know if one's missing. Most programs, or at least many programs, will review your application if we've only got 2 letters of recommendation. Most won't unless we've got at least 2, and some won't until they've got 3. And we don't know, you know, maybe the best letter is, you know, out there somewhere, and they're still waiting for it, and it'd be the stellar one, but we don't know that you're even waiting for it. Maybe that was your 4th one, so do chase them. All right, let's rotate to your CV and ERAS application. Chronological order, no time gaps, okay? We've got to fill all that time from high school effectively.
I look at that first, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've done enough that I can sort of see where there's
Yeah.
a gap, and I'm expecting that you'll tell me whether there's a gap, what you did during that gap.
Yeah, that's the next thing they'll look at, so make sure they're there. Include all your employment, unless it's just fluff. Brief detail only needed. This was a delicious menu that somebody put into theirs. But really way too much detail. The volunteer activities have now been moved to the experiences section, but include all significant. Explain your role and don't exaggerate. So be honest about the time spent. We once interviewed a student here who I pointed out to him that if we added up all of the time he spent sort of not doing medical school stuff, it was 40 hours a week. And we weren't quite sure where he managed to fit all of this in. So, you know, just be reasonable. These are not volunteer activities, okay? We thought, but pretty funny. Research activities, list all and your time commitment and your role, okay? If your role was reviewing patient charts or annotating images or whatever it happens to be, and be honest about your time commitment, and then say what the outcome was. Put in, you know, is it published or is it planned to be published? And you will, you may be asked about this. So be aware, you know, if this was research you did as a first-year medical student, you might want to just quickly read the paper or the abstract or whatever it was before you start interviewing them. Because if people say, oh, wow, that's really fascinating. I did some research into this area. What did you find about so-and-so? And you just kind of mumble and go, well, you know, long time ago. It's not going to look great. So here is the data, and this is all from the latest page 356. Oh no, actually it was only page 55. That one, yep. Of the number of research projects and the number of publications of radiology, this is radiology specific, in those who matched and not matched. And you can see that you can not match and still have, you know, 5 or more research projects, or 5 or more publications. So, and you can match with, you know, none. So just to give you kind of an idea here, most people have got 2 or 3 projects, I guess that comes out into the mean then, and some have got many more. So many more is not necessarily going to make any guarantee that you're going to match. It is going to depend somewhat what kind of position you're going for. If you're going for a very research orientated program, they may be looking much heavier than these than if you're looking at one that is more clinical. And I already said this. All right, step 2, scores and matching. Again, this is the latest data that we have. And it's kind of interesting because, you know, it's kind of like, you know, it comes up and then we go, whoop, and that cutoff seems to be over about 210. So, you know, when you go up here, I'm trying to think, did I have another one? Yeah. So if you go up here, your probability of matching is really very high when you get a 270. Yeah, fine. But, you know, most people are going to be around here. So you can see there's a pretty steep curve here. Now, is there a cutoff score for interviews? According to an NRP survey, that nearly half programs do have a cutoff score for interviews. And some of them, it is actually mentioned in the AAMC guide that I'm going to talk to you about in a moment. Most programs are a little bit coy about this, but some of them actually put it out. You know, maybe it's 220. There was a few programs out there, it's 240. It's a high level. Maybe it's 210. Do we have a cutoff, Dr. Yen, and are you willing to?
I don't have a specific cutoff, but I mean, we're gonna review all the applications. The likelihood to get an interview is probably better if your
Bit higher,
score
yeah.
is on that slope that you showed.
Yeah, so, you know, it's there and out there, and we'll
Well,
talk about.
we have interviewed people with scores
Low.
below 220.
Oh,
so-
we've matched people below 220, I know, and actually, some of them were our best residents, so there you go.
I think it's a matter of having an explainable deficit in your application. And if your board scores is lower, but you've done more research and you have better letters and a great personal statement, that board score isn't going to matter as much. It will still be, if it's really low, it's still going to be something we hem and haw about a little bit.
Usually those people will actually explain as to why they made their step scores low. Say there was like a family emergency or something right before they took the step, or they don't do well on step, standardized tests or something to explain why, or have a letter writer sort of explain, and that actually will help, I think, compensate for the apparent low step score.
There was a question there, is it one that?
How far back do we document experiences, research, et cetera, in eras? For example, we finished undergrad 2 decades ago.
I would say, well, it depends. If it was significant, I would put it in. If it wasn't that significant, if you were a research assistant that worked on a big project and you got papers out of it, I'd put it in there. Any publications you have, even if it's 2 decades ago, you should put in. But I don't think you have to put in, all your undergrad stuff that really didn't, that was looking at tadpoles, that didn't result in anything. All right, so my advice, do step 2 early. Take some time off, study for it. And it's more important than ever since step 1 was pass-fail. By the way, that might change in future, but that's it in the moment.
Question, since step 1 is pass-fail, is complex level 1 enough? I would prefer to see a complex.
There were 2. Yeah. 2, definitely. And preferably step 2.
Yes.
Yeah. Give yourself an advantage. All right. So take it before. So take it, in June before you do some electives, take it in August, but sometime, so that score, I think it's about 4 weeks till they get the score, something like that. It's a bit less than it used to be. That score can be in there. What about AOA? So this was some figures are pulled out from a while ago. So AOA, 19% of students who matched in DR had it, 3% of them that had it didn't match. Okay, so it's not a guarantee. A little bit higher in IR, and just give you some equivalent areas of the high-ranking specialties. So by the way, radiology is the 5th in this last go around. The 5th most popular specialty, diagnostic radiology. They only listed the top 5, so I can't tell you where IR was. I'm sorry. I'm sure it's number 6. So this is for DR. So yes, had AOA, no, had AOA. So you can see it's much less important than in some other areas. If you have a significant update to your application after you've loaded to ERAS, something like a paper published or presented or an award, or your step 2 score wasn't in there and you got 280, then that's worth emailing out to the program directors. I wouldn't put just blurb in. So you can have a little standardized template. Here's an example, blah, 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 and just send that up. So not this. Photo, boring's good. Passport photo with a smile, right? All your clothes on, please. Only you in the pics. Okay, let's talk a little bit about hobbies. Now, as you could see by that DR survey, that the vast majority of program directors did not think that hobbies were of any interest whatsoever in terms of their interviewing and in terms of their ranking. It very much depends on the program. In this particular program, for example, because we're a rural program, and we see that somebody, loves to hike and ski and, whatever, then that's kind of a little positive influencing factor because we know they'll be happy here. It's not that we only like to associate with people who like to hike or ski or walk there. we always kind of laugh that, you know, 2 kids and a retriever. It's not that. It's just that we know that they tend to be happy here, where if their hobbies are very urban related, they may not be as happy. And so it's really that. They also are topics for board interviewers. So it's something to talk about, because why do you want to go into radiology when you've asked it 100 times? It gets really tedious. Only put them in if you want to discuss them. So unusual hobbies, be careful, make sure it's really a hobby. And if it's something that the faculty can check on the web, make sure that it's accurate. So no hyperbole. Performing in a school concert does not make you a concert pianist. And we've had that. These are not hobbies. And seriously, these have come straight from the ERAS hobby section. I'll just let you read about those. And then some hobbies are really best kept to yourself. Competitive eating, fascinating but weird, and semi-competitive evening, super fascinating discussions with this guy, but I'm 100% sure that he was really wished that he had not put that in by the time he discussed his semi-competitive eating. I did like the one at the bottom. Yeah, I mean, you know, how could you not interview somebody who has guinea pigs called Mango and Doodles? Be very careful with social media, right? It's your friend, but maybe it can be your foe, all right? Everything you post is public. I think in this political climate, we've all become very, very aware of that. Departments may search you on the web and see what you're posting, and it's considered an element of professionalism. So if you have some dodgy stuff out there, then scrub it. Remember that most of your interviewing faculty are older than you, they're a different generation than you, and their attitude to social media may be very different to you. Aunt Minnie can be very dangerous to go on. Don't feed the trolls. There have been many instances in prior years where students have interviewed at programs, they want to match there, and then they're really unpleasant about that program on Aunt Minnie because they want other students not to rank that program higher. I kid you not. I wish I didn't say these things, but I do. Be very, very careful with it. Better resources, student doctor network maybe, or that seems to be going the same way. Doximity, I think, is generally better, but be very careful. All right, coming back again to our ranking applications. So how many applications. So how many programs? It depends on your strengths, usually around 30 to 40 is okay. If you are looking for a visa, you need more. If you have a low step 2, more. Couples, more, often a lot more. If you're very limited by geography, you may need to do more. You want to end up with at least 10 interviews, ideally. That doesn't mean you won't match if you interview at less. I've had, you know, many students match. I had one student who only interviewed at one program and matched. I did admittedly tell the program director that he'd be crazy if he didn't match her, saying she was amazing and her husband was on faculty there, but I wouldn't advise that generally. I recommend that you apply to more preliminary programs because they are becoming the challenge. If you don't get that slot, you're not going to be able to get into a residency. You've got to have the ACGME prelim program. I was trying to find, and I cannot tell you, I must have spent an hour trying to find an update of this graph on the AAMC website, and I could not. So if anybody happens to know where it is, please email it to me. I thought this was kind of a useful graph. Now, this was from step 1, right? So, and they were supposed to have been bringing it out last year, an update to step 2, and I never saw it. What this basically says is that they broke down the step 1 scores into 3 groups. Green is more than 244, purple is 230 to 243, and then less than 229. And what this basically says, as you might expect, and this was this is the point of diminishing return. So the y-axis is the probability of getting into a program, and the x-axis is the number of submissions. And you can see how all of these graphs flatten off, but they flatten off at different levels. So for the probability of getting into if your high step score is, your probability of getting in is here, where you've got 30 applications, a lower step score, you might have to go up to 50 and so on. So it just sort of, I think it's a good example. And the data I've seen there's no reason to think that step 2 would be any different than this. I mean, the numbers might wiggle a bit, but it won't be any different. To find out about the different programs, there's 2 good places. You can go to Frida on the AMA, and you can pick things as specific criteria where you can look and see if it's university or university affiliated. So if you want to try and avoid community programs, that's the way to do it. So there's that setting, program setting. So just make sure that you go into that under the optional criteria, and it'll filter. The other good tool that has come out in the last 2 years or so is the AAMC Residency Explorer tool. And if you haven't been into this, I highly recommend you do. It's got a bunch of really good information. So you go in, you put in a bunch of criteria about yourself, your step scores, your grades, your personal preferences, and so on. And then it will filter a list depending on those criteria that you want to do. And it's going to show you a whole bunch of things like, you know, what kind of step 2, and this is the data from the previous year. And just to know that it's a voluntary thing, programs don't have to agree to it. We are in it, by the way. It tells you the step 2 scores of the prior years invited, who they ended up inviting, and so on. So, and some more stuff about the program. So, nice little tool to use. Okay, moving on to internship. So here's your choices: transitional, surgical, or medicine. In terms of the skills obtained, my personal bias is that students come in better qualified into programs if they've done surgical internships versus medicine, and transitional is super variable. There are some excellent transitional programs, or there's some where, I don't know, it's like they went on vacation for a year. However, residents tend to even up fairly fast. As we said before, for IR surgery, is it mandatory or just highly recommended, Tom?
I think it's becoming more and more recommended. I've heard some programs say, well, you know, we're doing so much interventional oncology. If you do a medicine internship and you do a lot of oncology, that may pay off for you actually in the end, rather than, you know, just a bunch of surgery. However, I've kind of come around now. I think by far the strongest the strongest way to set you up for success in IR is to do a surgery prelim year in the same program where you're going to do your residency. Number one, that means that when you are an IR chief, the surgical general chiefs will be the people from your internship year. You will know them and you'll know the system. Plus, you start already knowing the EMR. You're gonna and already knowing a lot of people in the hospital. And I think that can be hard to recreate.
Great advice there from Dr. Birdie. Challenge involved, surgery ones are unquestionably harder work. So there you go. As somebody who did half medicine, half surgery, I've had both sides of that. And yeah, the surgical one was worse, but they were both terrible. It was Britain in 1970s, 80s, just about. Any other comments, anybody online, or any questions? All right, we're going to move to interviews. So, pre-interview preparation, I can't say this strongly enough. Do your research about the program, right? This is 2025. There is more information than you can ever hope to have about the programs and the areas, and you know, it's really going to help you. You know, programs have beefed up their websites, there's videos, there's interviews, there's virtual tours, you have virtual cocktail parties, although they're pretty painful, I've heard. There are many ways to find out about stuff. You know, you want to know, where is the program? What are its unique features? You know, what does this program seem to do? What kind of electives or mini fellowships does this program offer? What away rotations? Are there any faculty who are particularly accomplished in areas that you're interested in? So you can ask very focused questions, because, and this is what they like to hear. We want to hear that you're interested in the program. You know, these are things we've had people say in interviews, you know. Wow, I didn't know there's so many trees in New Hampshire. Hello, this is our hospital, okay? In the middle of that green spot. You can turn down an interview, but you can't just not turn up, whether it's, in person or virtually. That is super unprofessional to do. And, if you're not you've decided that you got accepted from way too many interviews than you're able to do, or maybe there's a clash on that day, you can see whether they can reschedule it, which they may be able to, or maybe, you have to decide you want to interview at University of Connecticut versus the University of Massachusetts, or wherever you decide to do, that's fine. But the sooner you let people know, the better, because you are really doing another student out of an interview opportunity. We all have wait lists, and we all like to be able to, and that student on that wait list, may be super interested in our program, and they just didn't quite make the cut. And so, if you don't let us know till that day, it's too late for that student. So as soon as you know, just give us a polite email or phone the coordinator. Do not be late unless you have to. Sometimes things happen. We all know that shit happens. So just let us know, and people will always try to accommodate you. And program directors all know each other, okay? They all get together. The IL ones all know each other. DL ones know each other. So, seriously unprofessional contact gets about. If you do not get an interview offer at somewhere that you really want to go to, then email or phone the coordinator. Email's probably better. CC it to the program director, particularly for things like couples matching. So, your partner has an interview at Dartmouth Hitchcock, but you didn't get one. We may not know that. So, drop us an email and, explain, and people will try and accommodate you, or they'll put you on the wait list at least. As long as you're polite about it, it shows to us that you really are interested in our program, and that we will, put you on a wait list at least. And I sometimes reach out to when would be a reasonable time. Well, you're going to want to give, so it's opening up in the middle of September. Interview offers, if you're not hearing by, what would you say, middle of October?
Yeah, mid-October.
Yeah.
November.
Yeah.
We start our interviews probably the first or second week of November.
Yeah, so reach out, I would say towards the end of October, to programs, and just, give them a nudge, and, they may just say, oh, that's great, now you're happy, and you may well get in the wait list. People do get in from the wait list. The interviews start the moment you confirm, okay? So everything you say and do does. Coordinators have power. If the coordinator comes to us and says this student was rude and arrogant to them on the phone, that's really bad, because if you do that to our coordinator when you're a student, doesn't really bode well to what you're going to be like as a resident. We do not need to hear from your mother, right? And we have heard from mothers, right? You are grown up. So there used to be pre-interview dinners in the virtual era, and I have a whole slew of things to say about those. Now most places have virtual social hours, or, quote, cocktail hours. I don't think anyone drinks a cocktail, but, and they are usually groups of students and residents. Sometimes they have breakout rooms, sometimes they're done different ways. There may be a lot of residents, there may be a few residents. They are good opportunities for you to ask questions of residents, and most programs, don't have faculty there. We're not hovering, listening to them. Get you to assess the culture of the things, but try and be engaged, ask questions, because if you're just sitting there and listening, sort of you're not gaining, and when our residents aren't getting a kind of feel for you. They are painful. I've been told by students that, yeah, the first, half dozen are okay, and then they get to be painful, but I'm sorry. But just be a little circumspect. This is not your time to kind of, beef about things. All right. Virtual interviews. Log on ahead of time, make sure you're ready. Many interview programs offer you the opportunity for a test connection. If they do, you have any concerns, you haven't used that particular software, which would be remarkable in this time. They're not all Zoom. You can test it out and make sure you connect. Review the schedule and the connection details, make sure you know it. The time to be looking is not, 5 to 9 when your first interview is at 9. Decide where you're going to be interviewed. You want somewhere quiet, no disturbances, reasonable lighting, a sort of neutral background, and that has good bandwidth. If you do not have that in your apartment, any of those things, then ask the medical school if they have some space that you can use for interviews, and many medical schools do have that. Check your background. This is me. I do many of my Zooms from my kitchen table. And somebody pointed out, said to me once, why do you have 2 cocktail shakers? I then had to explain, no, I wasn't a raving alcoholic and why I had 2 cocktail shakers, but virtual backgrounds, I'm not a big fan of the virtual background, but if you do not have a neutral background, you can put yourself against, and you don't want to show your drinks cabinet with 2 cocktail shakers, then think about using them. Just remember, if you use a virtual background, don't move much, because if you do things like brush your hair, it makes it look like you're pulling your toupee off. If your system freezes or it crashes, don't panic. Programs will reschedule. Many programs have a kind of space free where they could add an extra interview if something happened at the end. Dress as if you were with a live interview. So be smartly dressed. Be careful with, I know that we all kind of like to dress from the waist up if we're doing Zooms from home and be in our PJs at the bottom, but that's okay. But make sure those PJs really aren't showing. Be very tolerant of glitches. They happen on our end. They happen on your end. It's not a sign of the quality of the program if their WebEx goes down. And they've really been incredibly successful, I think. I mean,
very few glitches that we've had.
Yeah.
Technical.
All right. The AAMC has an excellent preparation guide if you want to download it. All right, so interviews. We know you're smart. We know what med school you went to. We know that you guys have been working your butt off for, years. You made the cut. We see your transcripts. We see your scores. We know how smart you are. So a lot of what the interview is, we want to know who you are. Do we want to spend 4 or 5 years sitting next to you at PACS workstation? So can you relate to other people? Can you communicate clearly? Communication is super important in radiology. We are communicators. That's what we do all day long. Do you seem like you're a team player? Is there any red flags that might mean that you're a potential challenging restaurant? We want to hear that, you're interested in us and our program, that you can be engaging. Is it all about you, or, what are you going to bring to our program, as well as what we're going to do, educating you to make you a radiologist? And then, are you really weird? Because that can be very off-putting.
I would add on that for IR, in addition to the list of, we're going to be sitting next to you and all those things, I'm really looking for whether or not people are going to be good with patients, very specifically, because IR is really a clinical specialty. My mother-in-law got a port in this department 2 weeks ago. And I'm going to be thinking this interview session, or this interview season, how would I feel if that person on that screen was to put in my mother-in-law's port? How would they have talked to her? How is that going to come across? I know there's medical students now. They're going to be R4s and R5s by the time they do that. But is that potential there? Will they be good with their patients?
Very good thoughts. All right, so what do we like? We like students who know about the program. All right, so here's some examples of things that you might want to, I may not be specifics, but, some idea of what you might want to say. It means you've done your research, you're interested in us. It's not just, oh, this is my 10th interview. How fast can I get through it? So we like, relaxed students who can carry off conversation. They're enthusiastic about the specialty, enthusiastic about the program. The specialty, not the lifestyle. So, if you say, well, what time do you finish every day is your first question, that's probably not something that's going to make us feel real warm and fuzzy about you. We want you to be honest about your issues in your application. It's okay. People fail courses. People fail exams. People have mental and physical health crises. That's fine. You just need to be upfront about them and, say where you're going from here. And then the culture of the program is obviously going to vary with the program. Show some extra interest. So, you can ask if you have a particular area of interest and perhaps one of the person in that specialty or within that area is not one of your interviewees, then ask If you can, you know, have a follow-up, if you can have a meeting with them, contact for follow-up questions. Can you watch a stream? You know, many, well, most programs probably have WebExes or Zooms going for the resident lectures. So, but you might want to listen in and watch one of those going on. Be aware of your body language. We don't want people kind of too relaxed, like this guy out here, but on the other hand, you know, she's pretty tense, where the lady in the middle is sort of nice and relaxed. Here's something, if you have not watched the TED Talk, this is old now, 212, by Amy Cuddy. It's super interesting talk on how to prepare yourself for this sort of thing and how much more successful people were getting jobs if they used her skills. Generic questions. If, you know, do not say, what are the strengths and weaknesses of your program? Or tell me about your program. You know, we're interviewing you, not you interviewing us, but it shows that you really haven't got any specific interests. So ask specific questions about the program, not just sort of generic ones. Have a, you know, when you've done your background research, take notes, have your notepad there. You know, it's fine. Look and say, oh, you know, I was doing some research about your program and I came up with these questions, and just go into them. Bad things, not being able to substantiate something in the application, poor conservation. I can't even say it. Ugh, been talking a long time. Sorry, you can read it. Seriously, somebody said to former chair, dude, it's like totally awesome here. I mean, pretty hysterical, but inappropriate clothing. We had the pink sparkly tube top girl. That was interesting. You do not have to say where else you're interviewing. In fact, it is a ranking violation, NRP violation, for any of your interviewing faculty to ask you where else you're interviewing or ask you where you're ranking them. We also cannot ask family or personal information. That doesn't mean that you can't share it. If you want to share it and you say, oh, you know, I have a wife who's a teacher, what are the teaching opportunities? I've got 2 small kids, or I've got kids in elementary school. What are the schools like near here? You know, it's, you know, that's fine. If you want to volunteer it, then we can, you know, give you information that can help, but they cannot ask you if you're married. Sorry?
Or if it's on your ARIS application.
Yeah. If it's on your ARIS application, we can ask. It's open game for everything there. These are things that are rank violations, and if people violate them, you should let your faculty advisor know at your institution, and they can reach out to NRMP, and they can do it, you know, anonymous from your point of view, and they can do it after, you know, ranking's over and everything, but they should be let know. I would recommend, because this does happen, my students have come back to me many times, that you practice some kind of non-specific responses. So if they say, where else are you interviewing? I say, well, a bunch of places in the Northeast, and then some in the West, and then there's a couple in the Midwest. You know, you can just be generic about it. And do not, particularly, you know, if they ask where you're ranking their program, you say, I'm considering it very highly, along with many other programs. I mean, you know, that's just not appropriate. The interviewers are nice. They're going to be nice, all right? Don't get too wound up about it. They're going to be pleasant to you. They want you to feel welcome. So what kind of things are you going to look for in these interviews? The feel of the place. You know, do you want to spend 4 or 5 years or 6 years here, depending on what program you go to? Do they make you feel welcome? All right? Or do you feel like they're just checking the boxes and going through it? Do the residents seem happy in the social hour? Do the staff seem happy and engaged? The program director, you know, he or she, I wouldn't say they break your residency, but they can certainly make your residency. So, you know, I'm lucky that I have 2 of the best program directors in the country with me. And, you know, you may not all be as well, but there are some fabulous program directors out there, and they can really, you know, be tremendous advocates for their residents. You may want to find out if you have family, you know, what are the opportunities for your spouse or your family, you know. Perhaps they're rural, perhaps, you know, your spouse and your family want more urban things. So what is available for them? You want them to be happy while you're here. Use everything you can to find out about the local environment. You know, we've had residents who are surprised that, you know, we're a couple of hours from a major city. Most are delighted, and 2 hours, to be honest, isn't that far, but, you know, check where things are. And as I said, multiple sites give you virtual tours. What else do you look for? Well, if you're particularly interested in research, what are the opportunities for you to do research? What mini fellowships or elective opportunities are in the fourth year? You're totally allowed to ask the board pass rates. You're totally allowed to ask what the resident to fellow rates are, because programs that have more fellows, you may get less hands-on experience. How often are lectures given? Are they given by faculty and visiting professors, or are many of them given by residents? In some of the smaller community programs, is kind of more of a peer teaching. What's the call like? Is it night shift? How often do you do night shift? What are the salaries and benefits? What are some of the opportunities of fellowships? Because maybe if you've moved up here, and particularly if you've moved with family, you might want to not move again for your fellowship. And then keep track of this, because by the time you've interviewed 10, 15, 20 programs, they're going to blur into each other. So I highly recommend you get a spreadsheet. You start it on day one. You write down all the factors that you're looking for in programs. And at the end of every day, interview day, check the boxes of where that program seems to kind of rank, take down some notes on the program, and even consider ranking as you go. So after each interview, rank them again, okay, because then they'll keep, and we do this with our students after each interview day, it will keep it fresh in your mind. So, you rank at 1, okay, is 1. Rank at 2, which one did I prefer? I preferred program number 2. Rank at 3, rank them then. Keep doing that. It'll keep it fresh and it'll make it much easier. Do you send thank you letters? I wish I could give you the answer to this, because we have asked this many times and we've had many different answers. If any faculty are still on the call and are unconscious by now, please put in your opinion. If you're going to bother doing it, send them immediately. But follow up at the end of the season for the programs that you really do seem to be very attracted to. Make them personal, not generic, and say why you like this particular program, not just so I thought Dartmouth Hitchcock was great, period, bye. Email versus written, we've had discussions about that before. I don't think you two agree with the same thing, isn't it? You'd say email, right?
Doesn't matter to me.
Doesn't matter to you?
I think more recently they've been all email rather than written.
I think it's a nice touch. I think the same, email or written.
Okay. So we've had other program directors say they don't care and they discard them. Our experience, however, has taught us that I've ranked you number 1. If we had every resident who had ranked us number 1, we would have a incredible cast of residents. All right, so let's talk a little bit about ranking. This is again fresh off the press data. We're up to page 51 here. Here's your probability of matching. This is for DR, and I'm only showing the MD ones. You can go into ERAS for yourself and examine the 350 pages from ERAS, and you will find your own. If you're an IMG or your DO, you can find your own graph. But here's for MDs, so 95% match. It's 15 for an MD, and I couldn't work out what it was for DO. So up here, that's for 95%. So that's kind of what you need to have. So they say that you want to get at least 10 interviews. You've then got an 85% chance of matching. Here's for IR, different curve shape, which is kind of interesting. And I don't know how to explain it, but it's actually, I think probably because there's less IR programs, you're going to get less IR specific matches. The numbers over the years that you needed to match have increased. So you can see here that generally our match candidates ranked many less programs. Now they probably interviewed at many less programs, and the number of rankings has gradually increased over the years. So unless you hate the program, rank all the programs. Really focus on the top 3 and the bottom 3, and then you can kind of deal with all the rest. Don't fall in love with that top program so much so that if you match at the 2nd or 3rd, that you are deeply disappointed. You'll be fine. Trust me, I've had students weeping in my office because they ranked at some brilliant program that was number 2 or 3 on their list. And if you ask them a year into their residency, they'd be like, they're kind of mortified that they ever got quite so upset about this, because it's all working out just great. Here is the latest data on, this is all specialties 2024. They didn't break it down any further as to be helpful, but it's just good to know that, you know, for MD, 48% got their first ranking, you know, so that's really pretty good. And 3/4 of them got, you know, more than 3/4 got within their top 4. And DO, you know, not that much difference, to be honest. So what about applying to more than one specialty? This used to be a really bad thing, okay, but it's changed. This is 2024 data for DR, and you can see here that when you look at it, it adds up to nearly 50% of the applications applied to more than one specialty. Now that includes IR, so it's a little bit, and I can't find anything where they divided it out, where they said, you know, other specialties other than IR. So it's a little bit of a false illusion here, but still an awful lot of students, you know, are applying to, there's a big chunk here applying to 3. So obviously that's IR, DR plus something else here. And that is very different from how it used to be, as I'll show you. So, and this is IR. IR, there were only 8 students who matched, who applied to only IR. And there's 1 who only applied to IR who didn't match. So the vast majority, and I'm assuming that most of these will have applied, these 81 here, and probably I could sit down and do the math and kind of come up with a guesstimate, applied to DR and IR, and then these were applying to other specialties as well. This was, I thought, interesting. So this was from 2010. At that point, 88% only applied to radiology. So what happens, and I'm taking IR-DR match out of this, but talking about other specialties, you know, what should you do if you want to apply to some other specialty? My advice is talk very frankly with your faculty advisor if, you know, you have a good relationship with them, because they can only advise you properly. And their role is to you. Their role is not to the program. Their role is to you. So when I have a student who tells me that they're also applying in plastics or something, I had one do, I don't tell, you know, my program directors here, because that should not come into their equation. That's, you know, me, and I can only advise my student. But what do you do at interviews? So my advice, to be honest, because I can't predict how, you know, none of us can predict how individual program directors deal to this, is keep quiet about it. That's different than the IRDR. I mean, I think having that discussion is, you know, it really seems to be fine. People understand it. So keep quiet about it. If you're keeping quiet about it, you might want to avoid applying to different specialties at the same institution, because, you know, they meet the program director, you know, the things get about. So anyway, it's up to you, but maybe think about that. Or you can be honest and risk what people's responses are going to be. And I don't know, some faculty may be very understanding and say, totally see why you're applying to pediatrics as well as radiology. I suspect most won't. Your thoughts, folks?
I'm always for honesty. So, I mean, if they want to disclose it or not, sometimes we already get an inkling just reviewing the application. I'm not going to ask personally, but I'm personally for on. I mean, we've had double applicants before. There's people that when we see the rank list at the end that we didn't even realize they're applying to a second specialty. So, I'm typically one that won't pry, but I prefer honesty over anything else.
Tom?
I think that's fair. I get a handful of applicants every year that say all of their research projects have been in ortho or urology, and they've done nothing in IR, and they got honors in ortho and urology, and they did sub-Is in ortho and urology, and they're applying for IR. And, you know, I hope they've seen the light. I hope that they've, you know, realized the error of their ways and that IR is wonderful. And it just goes on the rest of the strength of their application, whether or not I'm going to rank them.
So talk to your faculty advisor. They're going to look at your strengths, going to look at, you know, your weaknesses, and, you know, hopefully can give you an honest opinion about it. I think it's, you know, when it used to be in-person interviews and you might meet that resident, you know, that student in the corridor on some other specialties interview day, it used to be more of a problem where, you know, maybe there's less cross-contamination now, but it's a challenging question. If anyone has any specific questions about that, but it's obviously becoming more common. I'm just going to talk very briefly about couples matching. The number of couples in the match is markedly increased, and the majority match, but sometimes only one matches and sometimes do. That's really an area of that. It's very specific to your couple, and you really need to work very closely with your medical schools, and hope you've got some good advisors there who can help you with that. But you do need to apply to a lot of programs, and every now and then, you know, couples end up in different cities, which is, you know, super tough. All right. So as usual, I'm sure I've gone over because I always do, because every year there seems to be more information. Oh, not too bad for me. More information. Oh. Right. Oh, set off weird stuff here on my phone. Hang on. Any more questions from anybody or comments? Okay, I will be posting this on YouTube. I'll take down the old one. It will be up there within the next couple of weeks. Sorry about the slight confusion about the signaling, but there you go. Now we got it right. We got it all straight. When is it? You want to answer that question verbally, Tom?
Okay, to talk about IR with DR programs. Well, how do you feel about that? If someone during their DR, well, I guess here at Dartmouth, if you have applied to IR and DR, it's probably a little bit harder in our programs to get an interview for DR. I can't think of the last time, or I don't think it's happened yet where we've had a DR, someone who has applied for DR and IR and only been interviewed from the DR side. Maybe it's happened. I don't know.
I don't think so.
In general, if you apply for IR and DR, we give you one interview if you're accepted for the IR portion. You kind of get a free DR interview out of it if you're also interested, because I've already locked you into that, and Stephanie is so nice.
No.
That and she's on my interview committee, so she gets a good look at them anyway. So you kind of get a little bit of a bonus there, but you have to get over the hurdle of getting an interview to the IR program as well. I think it's fine to talk about both. We are still in 2025, one big happy family. And I hope we continue that. But there's a lot of crossover in skills and residents, and the more the merrier.
And that's probably going to be dependent on the specific program. We do it here this way, but some other program may not. And the IR, you may need to interview separately for a DR position if you're applying to both IR and DR. Here we figure one interview, why waste your time for another interview that will count for both IR, DR, and for your IR interview and also for your DR interview when we interview you one time.
I know of two West Coast IR programs who are doing in-person interviews. So a couple of programs are moving that way in IR. It's certainly not the majority, but there is a minority that are doing only in person. And I know of several that have completely separated their IR from the DR interviews. So if you want to interview for both, it's two different interviews for the same program. We're not doing that at Dartmouth currently.
Any other questions at all? All right, well, thank you everyone for hanging until the end. I'm sorry it's so long. There's just so much information. I know some of you get a lot of help at your medical schools. I know some of the others, particularly the DO schools, that you don't get a great deal of support, and hopefully you can find this helpful. You're welcome to reach out to me if you have further questions. Good night.